You are about to view a factual representation of our legal battles. There is no commentary here, just unfiltered, unedited, and raw footage. We are taking you straight to the front lines of justice to observe the system exactly as it operates.
Hey, you need help? Looks like your key's stuck.
Yeah, it's not opening.
Give me your keys. Quiet. Don't make this hard.
Okay, just don't hurt me.
Wait.
The radio crackled to life at exactly 2:47 inches the afternoon. Detective Sarah Martinez was sitting in her unmarked patrol car, reviewing case files, when the call came through that would change everything. A dangerous fugitive had been spotted in the downtown area, and what happened next would test every skill she had learned in her 15 years of law enforcement. What started as a routine surveillance operation was about to become one of the most intense undercover missions of her career. The suspect they were hunting had evaded capture for months, and this time, Detective Martinez would have to become someone completely different to bring him down. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Detective Sarah Martinez had built her reputation on being able to blend into any situation. At 38 years old, she had worked everything from narcotics to organized crime, but her specialty was undercover operations. She could transform herself into anyone: a college student, a business executive, a street vendor. Her colleagues often joked that she should have been an actress instead of a cop, but Sarah knew that her real talent was reading people and situations in ways that kept her alive. The case that brought her to this moment had been building for 6 months. Marcus Webb, a 25-year-old with a history of violent crimes, had been linked to a series of armed robberies across 3 counties. The pattern was always the same. He would target young people, often teenagers, approaching them in parking lots or near schools. He would pretend to be lost or in need of help, and when they got close enough, he would pull a weapon and rob them. What made him particularly dangerous was his willingness to escalate violence when victims didn't comply fast enough. The last incident had gone too far. A 17-year-old girl named Emma had been walking to her car after her shift at a local coffee shop when Webb approached her. She had been talking to her mother on the phone, telling her she would be home soon for dinner. Webb asked her for directions, and when she stopped to help, he demanded her purse and car keys. When Emma hesitated, confused and scared, Webb had struck her across the face with his pistol, leaving her with a concussion and requiring 12 stitches. That attack had made it personal for every officer in the department. Emma was the daughter of a retired police sergeant, but even if she hadn't been, the brutality of the assault had crossed a line. The department had assigned their best detectives to the case, and Sarah Martinez was leading the undercover operation. The breakthrough had come from an unlikely source. A confidential informant who worked at a local auto repair shop had overheard Webb bragging about his crimes. More importantly, the informant had learned that Webb was specifically targeting teenagers because he believed they would be easier to intimidate and less likely to fight back. He had been scouting local high schools and college campuses, looking for victims who appeared vulnerable. That information had given Sarah an idea that was both brilliant and incredibly risky. She would pose as a teenager herself, using her youthful appearance and acting skills to draw Webb out of hiding. The plan was to set up a scenario where she would appear to be an easy target, walking alone in an area where Webb was known to operate. When he approached her, backup officers positioned nearby would move in for the arrest. The challenge was making the disguise believable. Sarah was 38, but she had always looked younger than her age. With the right clothes, makeup, and mannerisms, she could probably pass for someone in her early 20s. But to convincingly portray a teenager, she would need to completely transform not just her appearance, but her entire demeanor. Sarah spent hours studying surveillance footage of actual teenagers in the area where Webb operated. She watched how they walked, how they held their phones, how they interacted with their surroundings. She practiced the subtle body language of someone who was confident but not overly aware of potential dangers. She learned the current slang, the popular music, and the social media platforms that real teenagers used. The wardrobe was crucial. Sarah chose clothes that would make her appear younger and more vulnerable. Worn jeans, sneakers, a backpack that looked like it belonged to a college student, and a hoodie that was slightly too big for her frame. She tied her hair back in a simple ponytail and wore minimal makeup to enhance her naturally youthful features. When she looked in the mirror, even she was surprised by how different she appeared. The psychological preparation was just as important as the physical disguise. Sarah had to mentally prepare herself to act vulnerable while remaining alert and ready for action. She practiced walking with the slightly distracted gait of someone absorbed in their phone. She rehearsed the startled reaction of an innocent person being approached by a stranger. Most importantly, she practiced maintaining her cover while positioning herself for a quick transition to law enforcement mode when the arrest signal was given. The location chosen for the operation was a shopping plaza parking lot near the community college, where Webb had been spotted twice in the past week. The area had good sightlines for the backup officers to maintain visual contact while remaining hidden. There were multiple escape routes if something went wrong, and the proximity to the college made it believable that a young person would be walking alone in that area. Detective Martinez arrived at the staging area 2 hours before the operation was scheduled to begin. She went through final equipment checks with her team. Despite her youthful appearance, she was still carrying her service weapon, concealed in a specially designed holster that couldn't be detected under her loose-fitting clothes. She also wore a wire that would allow the backup team to hear every word of her interaction with Webb. The backup team consisted of 6 experienced officers positioned at strategic points around the parking lot. 2 were in unmarked vehicles at opposite ends of the plaza. 2 more were positioned inside the coffee shop with a clear view of the target area. The remaining 2 officers were on foot, disguised as maintenance workers near the college entrance. Each officer knew their role and had practiced the arrest scenario multiple times. As Sarah walked toward her position in the parking lot, she made the mental transition from experienced detective to vulnerable teenager. Her posture changed, becoming less confident and more casual. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through it, adopting the distracted behavior that Webb seemed to target. Her heart rate increased as she realized that everything they had worked toward over the past 6 months was about to be tested. The operation was set to begin at exactly 4:30 in the afternoon, during the time when students typically left campus for the day. The timing was important because Webb's previous attacks had all occurred during this transitional period when young people were moving between locations and might be less aware of their surroundings. Sarah positioned herself near her car, fumbling with her keys in a way that suggested she was having trouble getting the door open. This was the exact scenario that had preceded 3 of Webb's previous attacks. She made herself appear frustrated and distracted, the perfect image of someone who would be easy to approach under the pretense of offering help. The radio in her earpiece crackled softly as the team leader confirmed that all units were in position. The operation was now live, and everything depended on Sarah's ability to maintain her cover while drawing out one of the most dangerous suspects the department had pursued in years. The minutes ticked by slowly as Sarah maintained her position in the parking lot. She checked her phone, adjusted her backpack, and continued the performance of a typical college student dealing with everyday frustrations. The backup team remained silent in her earpiece, waiting for any sign of their target. At 4:42 inches the afternoon, Detective Rodriguez's voice came through the radio in a barely audible whisper. He had spotted a figure matching Webb's description approaching the parking lot from the south entrance. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to maintain the casual demeanor of her cover identity. She couldn't look around or show any signs that she was aware of being watched. Through her peripheral vision, Sarah caught sight of a man walking purposefully across the parking lot. He was wearing dark jeans and a gray hoodie, matching the description they had been given. His height and build were consistent with their suspect, and most tellingly, his path was taking him directly toward her location, rather than toward any specific vehicle or building entrance. Sarah made a show of dropping her keys and bending to pick them up, buying herself a few seconds to observe the approaching figure more closely. When she straightened up, she confirmed what the team already suspected. This was Marcus Webb, and he was moving into position to make contact with what he believed was an easy target. Webb's approach followed the exact pattern they had studied from witness statements and surveillance footage. He maintained a casual pace that wouldn't draw attention from other people in the area, but his eyes were focused intently on Sarah. He was evaluating her, looking for signs of awareness or potential resistance. Sarah gave him neither, continuing to appear absorbed in her own problems. When Webb was approximately 20 feet away, he called out to her. His voice was friendly and concerned, exactly the tone that had disarmed his previous victims. He asked if she was having car trouble and offered to help. Sarah looked up with what appeared to be genuine surprise and gratitude, thanking him and explaining that her key seemed to be sticking in the lock. As Webb moved closer, Sarah noticed details that confirmed his identity beyond any doubt. He had a distinctive scar on his left hand that matched their files, and his mannerisms were identical to those described by witnesses from previous attacks. More importantly, she could see the outline of what appeared to be a weapon concealed under his hoodie. Webb positioned himself between Sarah and the nearest group of people, effectively cutting off her most obvious escape route. This was another element of his established pattern. He liked to control the situation before revealing his true intentions. Sarah played along, continuing to struggle with her keys, while Webb offered increasingly insistent help. The conversation continued for nearly 2 minutes before Webb made his move. His friendly demeanor dropped away completely as he stepped closer and lowered his voice to a threatening whisper. He told Sarah that he needed her car keys and purse, and that she should hand them over quickly and quietly to avoid getting hurt. Sarah responded with the perfect combination of fear and compliance that Webb expected from his victims. She stammered that she didn't have much money, but that he could take whatever he wanted. Her performance was so convincing that Webb relaxed slightly, believing he had successfully intimidated another easy target. What Webb didn't realize was that Sarah had positioned herself strategically during their conversation. While appearing to fumble with her belongings, she had moved to a spot where the backup team would have clear lines of approach from multiple directions. She had also palmed a small device that would send a silent signal to initiate the arrest when she was ready. Webb pulled out his weapon, a small caliber pistol that he kept partially concealed under his hoodie. He pressed closer to Sarah, using his body to shield the gun from view while making it clear that he was serious about his threats. This was the moment when his previous victims had realized the full danger of their situation. But Sarah Martinez was not like his previous victims. When Webb demanded that she hand over her car keys immediately, she triggered the arrest signal. Within seconds, the parking lot erupted with activity as 6 officers converged on their location from different directions. Webb's reaction was instantaneous and violent. The moment he realized what was happening, he grabbed Sarah's arm and pressed the gun against her side, attempting to use her as a human shield. He screamed threats at the approaching officers, demanding that they back away or he would hurt his hostage. What Webb didn't know was that Sarah had trained extensively for exactly this scenario. Instead of panicking or freezing, she used techniques she had learned in defensive tactics, training to break free from his grip. In one fluid motion, she twisted away from the gun, struck Webb's wrist to disarm him, and created enough space for the backup officers to safely engage. The entire arrest took less than 30 seconds from the moment the signal was given. Webb found himself face down on the asphalt, surrounded by armed officers, with Detective Sarah Martinez standing over him in handcuffs. The transformation from vulnerable teenager back to experienced law enforcement officer was so dramatic that Webb stared at her in complete shock. As Webb was being read his rights and loaded into a patrol car, Sarah reflected on how perfectly the operation had gone. Months of planning, hours of preparation, and split-second execution had combined to remove a dangerous predator from the streets. The young victims who had been terrorized by this man could finally feel safe, knowing he was in custody. The arrest made headlines across the region, not just because of Webb's capture, but because of the innovative undercover operation that had made it possible. Detective Martinez became something of a legend in law enforcement circles, with other departments requesting her expertise for similar operations. But for Sarah, the real satisfaction came from a phone call she received 3 days after the arrest. It was from Emma, the 17-year-old girl who had been Webb's most recent victim before his capture. Emma had heard about the arrest on the news and wanted to thank the officers who had caught the man who attacked her. During that conversation, Emma told Sarah something that would stay with her for the rest of her career. She said that knowing Webb was in jail had allowed her to sleep through the night for the first time since the attack. She could walk to her car after work without constantly looking over her shoulder. She could help strangers who asked for directions without wondering if they meant her harm. That simple statement reminded Sarah why she had chosen law enforcement as her career in the first place. It wasn't about the adrenaline or the recognition. It was about making sure people like Emma could live their lives without fear. The investigation into Webb's activities revealed the true scope of his crimes. During the search of his apartment, detectives found evidence linking him to 17 different robberies across 4 counties, not just the 6 they had initially connected to him. Hidden in his bedroom closet was a collection of driver's licenses and credit cards belonging to his victims, trophies he had kept from each attack. Even more disturbing was the detailed journal Webb had maintained, documenting his methods and rating his victims based on how easily they had been intimidated. The entries revealed a calculating predator who had been escalating his violence systematically. Law enforcement experts who reviewed the journal agreed that Webb had been moving toward even more serious crimes, possibly including kidnapping or worse. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court painted a picture of someone completely lacking empathy or remorse. Webb showed no understanding of the trauma he had inflicted on his victims. During his initial interview after arrest, he seemed more frustrated about being caught than concerned about the people he had hurt. He actually complained that the police had used unfair tactics against him, apparently believing that his victims should have remained easy targets forever. Detective Martinez was called to testify at Webb's preliminary hearing, where she described the undercover operation in detail. The defense attorney attempted to argue that the police had engaged in entrapment, claiming that Webb never would have committed a crime if not for the staged scenario. The judge quickly dismissed this argument, pointing out that Webb had approached what he believed to be a genuine victim with the clear intent to rob her. The prosecution presented evidence from multiple victims who testified about the lasting impact of Webb's crimes. Beyond the immediate physical injuries and stolen property, many described ongoing anxiety, difficulty sleeping, and a persistent fear of being alone in public spaces. Several had sought counseling to deal with the psychological trauma. One young man had dropped out of college entirely because he couldn't bring himself to walk across campus after dark. Webb's mother attended several court hearings, sitting in the back row with tears streaming down her face. During a brief recess, she approached Detective Martinez and apologized for her son's actions. She explained that she had tried to get him help years earlier when she first noticed his concerning behavior toward others, but he had refused treatment and eventually cut off contact with his family. The conversation with Webb's mother provided insight into how someone becomes capable of such predatory behavior. She described a child who had shown early signs of aggression and manipulation, who had been cruel to animals and seemed to enjoy making other children cry. Despite her attempts to intervene through counseling and medication, Webb had continued down a destructive path that eventually led him to prey on innocent strangers. The trial itself became a showcase for the effectiveness of modern undercover police work. The prosecution played the audio recording from Sarah's wire, allowing the jury to hear Webb's threatening words and aggressive demands in his own voice. The clarity of the evidence left no room for doubt about his guilt or his intentions. What made the case particularly compelling was the stark contrast between Webb's perception of events and the reality captured on recording. During his testimony, Webb attempted to portray himself as someone who had simply been asking for help and had been misunderstood by an overzealous police department. The audio recording revealed him to be a calculating predator who had threatened violence against what he believed was an innocent teenager. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Webb was convicted of multiple counts of armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted kidnapping. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Given his age and criminal history, it was effectively a life sentence. After the sentencing, Sarah received letters from victims of Webb's crimes who had followed the case through news reports. Many expressed gratitude not just for his capture, but for the justice system working as it should. Several mentioned that seeing Webb held accountable had helped them begin to heal from their own experiences. One letter particularly moved Sarah. It came from a 19-year-old college student named David, who had been robbed by Webb 8 months earlier. David wrote that he had been considering dropping out of school because he couldn't concentrate on his studies after the attack. Seeing Webb sentenced to prison had given him the closure he needed to continue his education. He was planning to major in criminal justice, inspired by the officers who had worked to bring his attacker to justice. The success of the operation led to Sarah being invited to speak at law enforcement conferences across the country. She shared the techniques and strategies that had made the undercover operation successful, helping other departments develop their own innovative approaches to catching dangerous criminals. Her presentation always emphasized that the technology and tactics were only as good as the officers using them, and that success required extensive preparation and flawless execution. But Sarah's proudest moment came 6 months after Webb's conviction. She received an invitation to Emma's high school graduation. The young woman who had been Webb's final victim was now ready to start college, having overcome the trauma of her attack through counseling and the knowledge that her attacker was behind bars. At the graduation ceremony, Emma's father, the retired police sergeant, approached Sarah to thank her personally. He explained that his daughter had struggled with anxiety and fear following the attack, but that Webb's arrest and conviction had allowed her to reclaim her confidence. Emma was planning to study psychology in college, hoping to eventually work with other crime victims to help them heal. The conversation reminded Sarah of something her training instructor had told her years earlier during her first undercover assignment. He had said that the best undercover officers weren't just good at pretending to be someone else, but at understanding the people they were trying to protect. The ability to connect with victims and witnesses, to see situations through their eyes, was what separated effective officers from those who simply went through the motions. Looking back on the Webb case, Sarah realized that her success hadn't come from her acting ability or her physical preparation, though both had been important. The key had been her understanding of Webb's victims and her determination to prevent him from creating more of them. Every detail of the operation, from her clothing choices to her body language, had been designed with those victims in mind. The case also reinforced her belief in the importance of teamwork in law enforcement. The undercover operation had succeeded because 6 officers had worked together flawlessly, each trusting the others to perform their roles perfectly. The backup team had maintained their positions despite watching her interact with an armed suspect, waiting for her signal even when the situation appeared dangerous. Detective Rodriguez later told Sarah that watching Webb grab her had been one of the most difficult moments of his career. Every instinct had told him to move immediately, but he had trusted her training and waited for the planned signal. That trust had allowed the operation to succeed without anyone getting hurt. The Webb case became a training example used in police academies, demonstrating how careful planning, innovative tactics, and precise execution could remove dangerous criminals from the streets. But for Sarah Martinez, it would always be remembered as the case where justice was served for 17 victims who deserved to feel safe in their own communities. Years later, Sarah would receive occasional updates about the people whose lives had been changed by Webb's crimes and subsequent capture. Emma graduated college with honors and became a victim advocate. David completed his criminal justice degree and joined the police force in his hometown. Other victims moved forward with their lives, carrying scars from their encounters with Webb, but no longer living in fear of him. The operation had lasted less than an hour from start to finish, but its effects rippled through dozens of lives for years afterward. It was a reminder that law enforcement at its best wasn't just about catching criminals, but about restoring peace of mind to the communities officers served. Webb's conviction marked the end of his crime spree, but it also revealed disturbing details about how he had been operating for far longer than anyone realized. During the investigation that followed his arrest, detectives discovered that Webb had been methodically studying his potential victims through social media and public records. He kept detailed notes about their routines, their vulnerabilities, and the best times to approach them. The depth of his planning shocked even experienced investigators. Webb had created fake social media profiles to follow his targets online, learning their schedules and identifying when they would be most isolated. He had driven past their homes and workplaces multiple times, timing their movements and looking for opportunities. This wasn't random crime driven by desperation or drug addiction. This was calculated predatory behavior that had been escalating for years. Detective Martinez found herself wondering how many other criminals were operating with similar levels of planning and sophistication. The case had opened her eyes to the evolution of criminal behavior in the digital age. Webb represented a new type of predator who used technology and social media as tools for stalking and victim selection. The psychological evaluation revealed that Webb had an almost compulsive need to control and dominate others. The robberies weren't primarily about money, though he certainly took whatever his victims had. They were about the power he felt when he saw fear in someone's eyes. The journal entries showed that he had been particularly excited by victims who begged or cried, viewing their emotional responses as confirmation of his superiority. What troubled investigators most was Webb's complete lack of remorse. Even after conviction, he maintained that his victims had somehow deserved what happened to them. He claimed that people who couldn't defend themselves were naturally meant to be preyed upon by those who were stronger. This twisted worldview explained why he had specifically targeted young people and others he perceived as vulnerable. The case files revealed that Webb had been escalating his crimes systematically. His early robberies had involved minimal physical contact, but each subsequent attack had become more violent and invasive. Criminal behavior experts who studied his pattern agreed that he had been building toward even more serious crimes. The undercover operation had likely prevented kidnappings, sexual assaults, or worse. Sarah began receiving requests from other law enforcement agencies asking for her assistance with similar cases. Word had spread through police networks about the innovative approach that had led to Webb's capture. Departments dealing with serial predators wanted to learn how to adapt her techniques for their own investigations. The training seminars Sarah conducted became legendary in law enforcement circles. She didn't just teach the mechanics of undercover work, she emphasized the psychological preparation required to convince dangerous criminals that you were helpless when you were actually in complete control. The mental discipline required to maintain character while simultaneously planning tactical responses was something that couldn't be learned from textbooks. During one particularly memorable training session, a young detective asked Sarah if she had ever been afraid during the Webb operation. She answered honestly that terror had been a constant companion throughout the entire encounter. The key wasn't eliminating fear, but channeling it into heightened awareness and split-second decision-making ability. Detective Sarah Martinez proved that sometimes the most dangerous criminals can be brought down by officers willing to put themselves at extraordinary risk for their communities. Her transformation from seasoned detective to vulnerable teenager wasn't just brilliant acting, it was a masterclass in understanding predators and using their own tactics against them. What started as one woman's courage to become bait for a monster ended up saving countless future victims from experiencing the terror that Webb inflicted on 17 others. If you found this story as incredible as I did, let me know in the comments what you think about Sarah's undercover work. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this remind us that justice sometimes comes in the most unexpected ways. This case was brutal, but this case on the right-hand side is even more insane.
Welcome. Our objective is clear: to pursue the truth and hold established power to account. We follow the paper trail because the official records never lie. Thank you for watching and seeking the facts with us.